You never know when she's going to be recording.
Is it going?
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Keeping Runners on the Road. My name is Dr. Cameron Garber and I'm here with Mark Humbert, another one of our Body Smart therapists who we love keeping runners on the road. And so that's why we call it Keeping Runners on the Road. We want to help everybody stay healthy and safe as you continue on your running journey. So today we wanted to talk about why strength training is so important. And you may think, I've heard you guys talk about this before. It's because it's that important.
What?
Yeah. So strength training is so critical, but we want to kind of go over some of the statistics as to why that's so important and some of the ways that strength training can benefit you as a runner. Obviously, it increases your resilience and increases your ability to run faster and further. It makes it so you're less likely to be injured, all those good things. But let's dive into some of the nitty gritty as to why that's so important and how strength training helps your running.
Yeah.
So tell us some of the stats, Mark. You're a stats guy.
Yes, I know the numbers, right? So when we look into the data, about 65% of runners have experienced some type of running related injury, right? That's more than half, right?
Right, that's a lot.
And that's not even getting into people that have had recurring ones, right? So just a big portion of that population has already had that. About anywhere from 50 to 75% of those have come from overuse. That's what we typically see. I mean, even in the clinic, right? It's just overuse.
Not stepping on a pothole necessarily, or like getting hit by a car. It's more just the
just that repetitive loading that the body just hasn't adapted to handle that load.
Yeah.
And then so this number, right? It's a broader range. So
yeah, different studies reflect different things. So the range is huge.
Yeah. So we have from 20 to 70% of runners will experience a recurrence of running injury. Often the same running injury, right? You have people that are like, oh man, I've been dealing with this for years and it gets a little better and comes back in years. And
if I can raise my hand and interject here, the reason why it's such a broad range and the reason why so many recurrence of injuries happen, in my opinion, and well, there's actually pretty good evidence behind this too, is that people stop running when they get injured. And so they stop running, let it heal, but it doesn't heal strong, it heals weak, and they don't keep up on their strength training and they don't keep running. And so when they come back to running, they get that same injury or sometimes a worse or a different injury, because not only did that area heal weak, but everything else got weaker in the process.
Definitely.
And that's what strength training and continuing to run through an injury, just running in a smart way, is so critical.
Right, because what that does, again, is instead of just keeping us on this flat path, right? We start running, we get injured. We start running, we get injured. We start running, we get injured, right? It just kind of keeps us on this same, or like you said, maybe even a lower level sometimes.
As we age and other things, yeah.
Exactly, versus if we continue to continue to train and to load correctly and progressively, then we see this upward track, right? And as you get onto the higher side of that curve, right, your capacity is constantly growing so that you're able to absorb more load, and those recurring injuries become a thing of the past. And not only do those ones become a thing of the past, you're less likely to injure yourself in the future, right? Because you've kind of bulletproofed the whole system.
I mean, it's fun. I've seen a handful of 40 and 50 somethings that have been running for years that all of a sudden figured out strength training. And all of a sudden they're hitting PRs in their 50s. Saw one guy that we did some metabolic tests with, that in his I think mid 50s is running like 100-mile treadmill races. I can't even imagine doing 100 miles on brutal. But 100 miles on a treadmill, and then he's PRing marathons and half marathons in his mid-50s. He's doing incredible feats, and it wasn't until he learned cross-training so that he could continue to train even through injuries, and then strength training so that he had fewer injuries and was able to really build up his resistance so that he was so much more resilient, and he got faster through the whole process. Figuring that out, that strength training and how to cross-train appropriately really made a huge difference. But I've seen that with several people as they age. When they start to put it all together, they actually wind up doing better than they did in their 20s and 30s, which is pretty wild to see improvement when everybody else is seeming to drop off.
Yeah. So one of the words you've probably heard us drop a couple times, right, is just the load, right? Our ability to handle load.
Right.
And I'm gonna grab some props real quick.
Sure. Yeah. So load resilience and load resistance is so critical. If you can improve your resistance to load, so that you have a greater capacity to bear it, it's so important.
Okay. So
Mark's got this demonstration here.
that's
Ready?
demonstration. It's gonna be so exciting. Okay. So we want to talk real quick tissue load versus capacity, right?
Yeah.
And so, fun example. Okay, so what we are looking for is this bucket to be tissue capacity, right? How much load that can absorb in, over a given period of time or in a given session. And this is just the tissue load around. So tissue capacity, tissue load. What we want to see, right? We fill up the cup with that and we pour it in and we pour it in. And it's going to be able to take quite a few of these to fill this up, right? What happens sometimes is we get to a place where the tissue capacity is more like this, and then, right? It can't bear the amount of load that we're putting on it. And so that's when we see injury occur.
Right.
Or even if we don't get to the level of injury, just getting more fatigued and worn down with each subsequent workout.
Right. And we see that a lot where people will either start up and 10 years ago I used to run 5 miles a day, so I want to start off at 5 miles a day again. Or we see it with, normally I run like a 5 to 6 mile run most weekends. Sometimes I'll do a long run, like 8 to 10 miles, but my friends invited me to go run with them and they were doing like a 16-mile run, so I go and do it. And it just beat me up, right? I wasn't prepared for it. Or I've seen one where, an interesting one we had a couple of weeks ago was somebody that had done their long run on Saturday. And then Monday, some friends invited them to go on a long run with them up in the mountains. And so they wound up doing like another, I think 14 miles or so. And so now within a 7-day window, they had already way exceeded their typical miles for the week. And so that their running miles, your body doesn't just start over on Monday. And so having run more like 45 miles when they normally run like 35 miles a week, 45 miles in like 4 or 5 days, it was too much and they wound up feeling pretty beat up from it. And so that kind of a thing, being careful how you're loading that tissue is really important. And strength training, what that will do, it can't help for training mistakes like stacking 2 long runs in a row, but it can help build up your resilience so that you're not as beat up, not as fatigued, and really discourages some of that risk for injury. So
yeah. And so let's talk about types of strength training, right? Because it encompasses a broad range of different types. And,
right.
And what we'll see, right? There's always the next new workout rolling into town, right? The next fad. But really it comes down to basics, and we see a couple of differences, not mistakes per se, but there's a better way, right? Typically what we hear from runners is, oh man, strength training, I don't know about that. That's for the meatheads, that's for the muscle heads.
Or I don't want to bulk up.
Yes.
That's probably the biggest one I hear is I don't want to bulk up and I don't want to get slower or feel more tight.
Yeah.
I strength train, but I like to build endurance with my strength training. So I do low load, high repetition.
Right. And the problem we see with that, we're already getting that with running, right?
Right.
And that repetitive loading. And so to really, get the whole system where we want it to be, we've got to change how we're loading.
And the evidence doesn't really bear out that strategy works as well. The number of reps, the amount of repetitions you have to do from a low load, high repetition is quite a bit more than kind of what we think. So we're actually better off in building tissue strength and resilience, typically by going with a little bit lower repetition, higher load. So 6 to 8 reps is typically ideal. 3 to up to about 5 sets. And that's going to do a little bit better job at strengthening and building your strength and building your tissue resilience. And so that is kind of that 3 reps for 6 to 8 repetitions. By the time you can do 3 sets of 10 reps, you better be bumping the weight up. it's getting too easy for you and you need to increase that load. Will you bulk up with strength training? No, you shouldn't if you're training that way and you're not really increasing your calories a lot. If you increase your calories a lot, then yeah, you can gain weight with anything. And so just be careful with that you don't increase your calories or increase your protein load too terribly much to match that, and you shouldn't bulk up. That isn't typically a problem, especially if you're getting in enough cardiovascular work. It kind of you get the right type of adaptation for what you're trying for.
Definitely. When we're talking adaptations, another really important one that we find helps in terms of adaptations, not just muscle, but some really positive effects in bone, right? We've heard it thrown around, right? As a runner, you want the bones of a basketball player. And that means that they need to be able to absorb that high load. And so we see some really positive changes with that high load, lower repetition in terms of bone density. And bone gets kind of bored after so many reps, after 10, 15 reps or so. And so we want to get that high load for the bones as well.
And same thing is true with running. Bone does get bored after a while. The positive impact of running in increasing bone density actually plateaus out after a little while. And so we don't get that same effect. So yeah, essentially, we've got to do strength training so that we can have the load capacity through all of our tissues, tendons, ligaments, bones, everything. Strength training really, really helps. And so if you can incorporate that into your running, it's going to keep you healthy and keep you on the road. And that's what we're all about here at Body Smart. So hopefully that was helpful. We love to hear you on. So any questions or anything you might have, please drop that in the comments down below. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe so you can see the rest of our videos. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day.